from there.
That's fine.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I think we're good to go. So I guess, yeah, are you happy for me just to ask you a few questions and then you can
of course
give me your responses, really? And I'm going to start from the bottom. So I'm going to start with the real basics, purely because not everyone in my network and probably not everybody in your network is a techie. So it's really kind of to aim at all levels of individuals, both those with no experience and those probably with experience. So the questions will kind of change relating to the different levels of our audiences. So given that one of the trends that I presented to you was quite relevant to you and your business right now was the low-code development, maybe you can just kind of explain in brief what it is. What is low-code development?
Of course. Low-code development basically allows you to build an application out of building blocks instead of coding it on your own. You can sort of define a process or some workflows that allow you on the drawing board, on a, let's call it a wizard, to define how that is supposed to function, how that is supposed to look like, and it produces the outcome automatically. It basically gives you almost ready application afterwards that you can start using instead of focusing in that regards on developing the application afterwards. When you say, this is what I would like to see, and then developers start to work on it to create the application. It's a tool that actually develops your application based on your requirements.
Excellent. And with it being a kind of trend, let's say a 2020 trend, how long has low-code development as a concept been around for?
Well, I think it started very early with something like BPMN, business process model notations, where people were starting to think about the process itself and sort of were able to generate out some code out of that. This never ended up in an application that actually produces real code. Some companies tried that, but the complexity around that was quite difficult because we needed to get more advanced front-end technologies and back-end technologies in place, like microservices and component libraries. Now, having that in place and sort of using the technologies that we have in place and some older technologies allows you to actually go into this direction much faster, much better. So yeah. I think it is a very trendy result that other technologies, different technologies moved on, and now everything sort of comes together.
Sure. And I guess by its nature, it doesn't require obviously someone who can learn lots of code. It's kind of more of a drag and drop style system. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say it's a drag and drop, like a wizard, like something where you can WYSIWYG sort of create your application, define what needs to happen at a certain stage, define some workflows, and sort of roll that out to different device types.
Sure. Does that mean it's kind of user-friendly for someone like me who's not a techie? Does it mean people like me would be able to kind of develop things using low-code development as opposed to someone perhaps like yourself who's got decades of experience in coding skills?
Yeah, I think it just moves the complexity. It moves the complexity about the wizard into the tech team that's sort of maintaining the wizard and providing the flexibility. And the person who's sort of creating the application, they're using the low-code application into that area of defining what the process is supposed to look like and how it's supposed to function. I think the user-friendliness that is going to be still an issue is the design and how those components are interacting with each other to make sure that it's still user-friendly for the end user who then is sitting in front of the application trying to use it. But those are the steps that I think are going to come in the next areas.
Excellent. Sure. Okay, great. I guess moving on to the kind of the two things, I guess a double-edged question really here is, how do you see it being best used and kind of how are you using it yourself right now?
So I think it's best being used. Yeah, I would say it's best being used in areas where you have a lot of change, frequent change about process models. So for example, if law changes, if you get different requirements about taxes, about financial situations that you have to change around different payment providers, different interfaces that you have to connect to on an ongoing base, based on how the market is moving really fast. And in that area, I think the complexity that you usually have to deal with in an IT team, where you have to have multiple people working on the integration piece, is going to be removed. It's going to be moved to a product owner team, sort of focusing on what kind of interfaces they would like to connect, what kind of technologies they would like to integrate with, and allows them to basically define that on a very high level already and sort of get the application out and the changes out much faster. So it's going to change that kind of time to market approach for business applications quite a lot. And it's going to focus more on maintaining that sort of wizard functionality, this kind of low code application that allows you to put the knowledge into an expert team that focuses on the wizard and makes sure that the wizard and all the capabilities around that are sort of functioning. So it's a very good, I would say, use case for business applications, maybe as well for some content applications that have changes of content as well in that area. So those are the two areas where I would say it's very well suited.
Okay. And so that's kind of how it's best used. And could, without kind of divulging any information as such about, let's say, your kind of current employer, but more generalization of projects that maybe you're using this development for?
Yeah, I can sort of abstract one use case. Let's say a big car company trying to roll out like a credit application where people can sort of get into the loan process for the car, and that on multiple different countries, where you have different credit card providers, different payment methods, different integration points for customer service desks, checking the application, sensing if all the content is available. Every country needs different kind of content provided. So building that for like multiple countries requires, in general, a team that is quite big to sort of maintain that and develop it for each country. If you move that to a low-code application where each country sort of on a product owner level can define how the process is looking like, that's building the application based on your setup that you sort of defined with your expert team, you can reduce the time to market, I would say, by at least 50%.
Wow, as much as 50%.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's definitely worth people looking at something like this. I was going to say to you, what kind of benefits does it personally provide you? But in reality, you've kind of ticked off loads of those boxes, haven't you? 50% quicker time to market. So these are the reasons kind of why that you're using this particular trend. So I'll skip on from that question then quickly, because we've kind of already answered that. But what do you think personally the future shape or direction for low-code development is going to go? What other advances can it make? How can it improve? From a personal opinion.
Well, I think it's going to improve a lot on the side for development teams. What you hear a lot about development teams is they always have to repeat the work that they're doing based on the requirements coming in. It's a very, let's say, a lot of work needs to be repeated based on similar tasks that have to be executed. And especially on that level, it's going to make sure that you can focus on a more complex topic with a lower amount of people. And everybody's sort of also a bit more happy because the tasks and the skills that are required are a bit more complex and they move into a different direction. It's less repeating the work that you have done. It's more focusing on the complex situations that you're facing. And this is where this low code still, of course, needs to learn quite a lot about the complex situations that are happening in regards to workflows, in regards to user experience, user behavior design, how that's sort of going to interact, look nice for the end user in the end, not just like step by step and you feel like sort of a code monkey that's just filling out the forms. That's where it's going to require quite some time to get to a nice view for the end user, and the complexity that needs to be handled on the backend side.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So it's got clearly there's still a lot of work that can be done from a UI UX perspective for users. Um, and
I
what
mean,
about?
SAP, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. What was that?
SAP has basically already some areas in place where they're trying to say this is a standard for business applications, how they're supposed to look like, and with some user experience around it. But still, a bit, from my point of view, at least, it feels like there's a lot more that can be done on that side in regards to a nice looking application, a nice look and feel.
Yeah. Um, Characteristics of low code development. So, I guess you could say some characteristics might be a simple UI, which again clearly is what you've just mentioned. Maybe if an off-the-shelf version perhaps isn't available. Are there any other kind of characteristics that you see?
Yeah, what I like, so from my point of view, I think a good introduction or entry point is BPMN, business process model notations, where a lot of companies are focusing on to sort of already streamline their process around. And if you think that a little bit further, it can lead to an application that actually is sort of already a low-code application. But it needs, that's a good starting point if you want to get used to that kind of application about how you define a process, how you actually want to make sure that the different requirements are sort of mapped down. BPMN would be the starting point.
Yeah, sure. And are there any pitfalls to it? Are there any kind of downsides? I'm sure there are. There are probably downsides to many things, but are there any particular pitfalls that maybe you've encountered along the way yourself?
Yeah, especially if it comes down to the point of scalability and making sure that the application performs still in a very performant way. Testing, test automation, testing concepts are quite complex around that topic because you can have so many different variations about what the outcome of the product is going to look like. Those are the elements that are quite complex to handle, so far from what I can say.
Yeah, sure. You kind of took the words out of my mouth again. So I think you're a bit of a mind reader there. I was going to say, is it scalable?
It is scalable. If you from the beginning start using a good architecture like something where you can think about microservices, where you can think about a horizontal scaling like Kubernetes in place, you can sort of provide that kind of scalability to a large degree. The more complex topic then is test automation, how the application and the different variations of what the outcome are sort of tested in a way that the user can experience a smooth, errorless application without any problems inside. That's a bigger topic.
Yeah. So it's scalable. How secure is it from a security perspective?
I would say security is actually something that is quite good because you can, at least from what I'm sort of encouraging is I build the application as soon as I have this low code requirement in place. So while building the application, I can make sure that it's hardened, that it's quite secure from that level, and it's tested as well. So there's, I would say, a high level of security in place.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess, look, I don't want to sort of ask you 1,000,001 questions.
Oh, one more thing about the security. As soon as you start building a low-code application, the thing that you also create at the same time is a documentation about how the application is behaving. So you get two things that are sometimes quite difficult to get: a very solid documentation and a very solid application in the end, which is also for some, especially financial industries, quite relevant to make sure that you have a documentation in place, how processes are looking like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the documentation clearly, is there to, give advice, guide, any new people into the business, any users, etc. So surely, documentation is probably just as important and pivotal as the testing side. I guess, without kind of going into many more questions, it was kind of to keep this reasonably short, let's say, just as a kind of, easy read, easy watch, let's say. I guess as a final thought, what skills, if you were to look at employing somebody to work with you to develop this low code, what skills would you be looking for from an individual?
I think from a product point of view, I would like to see BPMN UML experience about process models, workflows, how they are being structured. That helps to sort of define the application and sort of create it on a much more experienced level. From a development point of view, test automation, of course, needs to be in place, microservice architecture and component libraries. If this is React Angular, using something like Storybook that allows you to sort of reuse your components and connecting that. So full stack people that have sort of the end-to-end experience about microservice architecture and component libraries are quite helpful.
Yeah, sure. And are there, whilst on the topic, are there any kind of requirements your end right now?
For getting people or?
For people, for hiring, yeah.
So far, no additional requirements. I have to say I found some very good people and this is working out well. And it doesn't have to be like big team, so it's more an expert team that is quite fast moving.
I suppose that's the beauty of low-code development, isn't it? You don't necessarily require the large quantity of people to sort of produce something. And that's the beauty of it, I guess, which is probably why you're kind of using it.
Yep.
Okay, great. I mean, look, do you have any questions for me at all?
No.
No?
No questions.
No, that's fine. Okay, great. I'm just going to stop the recording, but then we can just finish off our conversation if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah, great.